Houston, Texas. An afternoon in early May 2023. Rain fell in white sheets, blurring the trees in front of the Harris County Civil Courthouse. Amidst the stream of people rushing to escape the downpour, I clutched a file folder to my chest that felt heavier than my entire 5 years as a wife. My name is Leah Miller. I'm 32. The little girl nestled against my shoulder is my daughter. Annabelle, we call her Annie. She had just turned 4 that day, far too young to understand why Mommy and Daddy walked into a room together but didn't leave as husband and wife. Inside the folder were Annie's birth certificate, the divorce decree with an agreed-upon child support of $800 a month, and a bank statement for a $25,000 savings account. I gripped it so tightly my fingers went numb. Money could buy a place to sleep, but it couldn't buy back the years I'd lived like a shadow in my own home. My now ex-husband, Vince, was the last to walk out. He was 4 years older than me, a sales manager for an electrical supply distribution company. Looking at Vince's polished appearance, no one would guess he'd just signed away 5 years of marriage. His phone screen lit up repeatedly. The name Diana glowed on it. Vince looked at me, his voice as neutral as if he were giving instructions to a delivery driver. You keep the paperwork safe. I'll transfer the child support as agreed. He'd already said this in the courtroom. He was just repeating it for emphasis. Some things have to be said twice, usually because the first time, the speaker isn't sure they'll follow through. Vince frowned. For years, whenever he was annoyed, I would fall silent. I used to think if a couple yielded to each other, it would keep the peace. Only later did I understand that yielding to keep the peace is different from yielding until the other person feels entitled to hurt you. When we first married, I was an accounts receivable clerk at a furniture company. After Annie was born, she was often sick, and both our families lived far away. Vince suggested I quit my job for a few years to take care of her. He once held my hand and said, so sweetly, "You stay home and look after Annie. I can earn enough for all 3 of us." I believed him, but from the day I no longer had a paycheck, the way he looked at me slowly changed. At the beginning of each month, Vince would place the household money on the table and question every expense. One night, Annie's fever spiked to 104 degrees. I held her and called a taxi to the hospital in the middle of the night. I called Vince 5 times. He didn't answer. When he came home in the morning, the first thing he asked was, "How much was it?" I held my daughter, feeling a mix of anger and hurt. "You're not going to ask how she is?" Vince changed his shirt and replied casually, "I'm asking so I can budget the money. Besides, you're at home all day. How tired can you be just looking after one little kid?" He said that so often that sometimes I started to wonder if I really was useless. If his shirt wasn't ironed on time, if dinner was a little cold, or if Annie cried right when he got home, everything immediately became my fault. They say that with a united husband and wife, you can do the impossible. But when one person is rowing and the other is standing on the boat complaining that they're rowing too slowly, you'll be exhausted before you even reach the middle of the river. I discovered Vince and Diana Pham through a hotel receipt in the pocket of his suit jacket. At first, he said he was entertaining clients. Then I saw a text message confirming an order for a bouquet of cream-colored roses on Diana's birthday. My birthday had been 2 weeks earlier. He had just Zelled me some money with a text that said, "Buy yourself something nice." That night, after Annie was asleep, I placed my phone in front of my husband. "You and Diana, when did it start?" Vince looked at the screen for a few seconds, neither startled nor defensive. "Since you already know, let's just be direct. I'm tired of coming home and always seeing you with a sour face." I laughed because the pain was too much. "My child is sick and you don't come home. I'm up all night, and you say I have a sour face. Dinner is cold because I'm waiting for you, and you say the house is suffocating. So you having an affair is my fault too?" Vince leaned back in his chair. "We've fallen out of love. You raise Annie, and I'll send money. Don't make a scene. It'll be embarrassing for both of us." I had hoped for an apology, even a single word, but there was none. He spoke of our marriage as if he were liquidating old stock, divide the assets, and everyone goes their separate way. That's why I didn't argue in court. The $25,000 was clearly noted as the marital asset settlement and a support fund to help me and my daughter get on our feet. The $800 monthly child support was Vince's separate obligation to Annie, to be transferred before the 5th of each month. I read every line, questioned every clause. I no longer trusted his "I'll take care of you," because that very promise had once made me hand over my career, my income, and my youth to him. The rain hadn't let up. Vince opened a black umbrella and looked at our daughter. "Annie, come here. Daddy will carry you to the car." She hugged my neck tighter and turned her face away. Vince looked slightly embarrassed. "Don't say things that will make her hate me." A chill went through me. "Don't worry, I don't need to teach my child to hate her father. Children remember who was there when they needed them." His phone rang again. Vince answered it and walked a few steps away. His voice suddenly softened with a tenderness I hadn't received in a long time. "I'm done. Wait in the car, it's pouring." I watched him walk towards a car parked across the street. Under the courthouse awning, a middle-aged woman looked at me and sighed. I couldn't tell if it was pity or just curiosity to see how badly the abandoned wife would cry. But I didn't cry. Annie placed her small hand on my cheek. "Mommy, where did Daddy go? Daddy has to work. Is he not coming home with us, Mommy?" It took me a moment to answer, my throat tight. "From now on, Daddy will live in a different house." She blinked, watching the rain fall in the courtyard, and then asked, "So where are we going?" An image of a modest ranch-style house in Conroe appeared in my mind, with a morning glory trellis in the yard, the smell of my mom's pot roast, and the oak tree where my dad used to sit and drink his coffee. I still believed that no matter what happened out there, my parents' house was a place a daughter could always return to. I adjusted Annie's jacket and stood up straight. "We're going to Grandma and Grandpa's house. I'm sure they'll love having us there." Annie nodded and leaned against my shoulder. I held my daughter and walked down the courthouse steps, straight into the curtain of rain. At that moment, I didn't know that in the sentence I had just uttered, the word that would later cause me the most pain wasn't Grandma's house, but shore. The Greyhound bus left the city as the rain began to ease. I sat by the window, one arm around Annie, the other hand holding the file folder at my feet. She drifted in and out of a light sleep, her hand still clutching my shirt. I told myself, just get home, and everything will be easier. From the small bus station in Conroe to my parents' house was just over 2 miles. The country road, slick with rain, was so familiar that I almost forgot I was returning as a divorced woman. The single-story house looked the same. In the front yard, the vegetable garden my dad, David, had built was still there. From the kitchen, I could smell the faint aroma of slow-cooked beef. As soon as I stepped off the taxi, my mom, Sarah, came out of the house. She looked at me, then at Annie. And finally, her eyes rested on the folder I was clutching. "You're back," she said. Her tone was nothing like the times I'd come home for Christmas. There was no hug, no, "Let me hold my granddaughter." I forced a smile. "Yeah, Mom, I'm back." Annie shyly hid behind my leg. My mom bent down and stroked her hair. "Annie, do you remember Grandma?" "Yes," she whispered. My dad came from the backyard, his pants splattered with mud from watering the collard greens. He looked at me longer than my mom did, his lips moving as if he wanted to ask something, but, in the end, he just took my suitcase. "Come inside, Leah. It's cold and damp out here." Hearing my dad say my name made my nose sting, but then my younger brother, Tyler, walked out of his room. His hair was messy, a phone in his hand. He glanced at the suitcase and wrinkled his nose. "Are you back for good, Leah?" My mom snapped quietly. "What a thing to say." Tyler shrugged. "I'm just asking. Your old room is where I keep my stuff and sleep now. If you're staying, where am I supposed to move?" I answered softly. "Annie and I are just staying for a little while. You can leave your things, I'll just clear a corner." Tyler said nothing more, but his pout was louder than words. Less than half an hour later, Mrs. Gable from next door came over with a bowl of collard greens. Mrs. Peterson from the corner store also stopped by. News of my divorce was spreading through the neighborhood like wildfire. Mrs. Gable looked me up and down. "I heard your husband has a big job. How did things go so wrong when everything seemed so right?" "Mrs. Peterson chimed in. "Young couples these days are so hot-headed. Back in our day, if our parents had problems, they kept it behind closed doors." My mom sighed, her voice a mixture of sadness and blame. "She's grown now. She doesn't listen to what I say anyway. With that one sentence, my mom made everyone believe I was the one who didn't know how to keep a husband. Mrs. Gable lowered her voice. He has money, doesn't drink or gamble, doesn't hit you, and you still left him? There must be something more to it. My hand, which was pouring water, froze. Annie, sitting on the floor, didn't understand everything but still looked up at me. I managed a faint smile. Our issues are resolved, Mrs. Gable. My only focus now is Annie. Mrs. Gable gave a dismissive laugh. Well, only the one in the marriage knows what it's really like. I didn't reply. Her words sounded sympathetic, but her eyes were shining with curiosity. At dinner that evening, my mom served pot roast, collard greens, and a platter of scrambled eggs. She picked out the tenderest, juiciest piece of meat from the center and put it on Tyler's plate. Eat up, son. You have class tomorrow. She turned to me and served me a piece from the end. You have this, Leah. It has fewer strings. From childhood to adulthood, the best food in the house naturally went to Tyler. I was the older sister. I had to give way. But that day, that piece of meat on my plate made my throat tighten. Annie pointed at her uncle's plate. Mommy, I want the big piece of meat. Tyler pulled his plate closer. This is Uncle's. I gave her the rest of the meat from my own plate. Here, Annie, you can have Mommy's. She smiled instantly. A child only needs a piece of meat, but sometimes it takes a lifetime for an adult to understand the feeling of being put second. After dinner, I helped my mom with the dishes and swept the kitchen, trying to do everything as quietly as possible, as if to lessen the burden of our presence. That evening, my dad sat on the porch drinking his coffee. I had just put Annie to sleep when he called me over. Leah, come talk to Dad for a minute. I pulled up a chair and sat across from him. He stared into the dark yard, avoiding my eyes. The divorce. How did you two settle the finances? I received the marital assets and a support fund of $25,000. Vince still has to pay child support for Annie every month. My dad nodded. What do you plan to do with that money? I'll put it in savings, for Annie, and for a place of our own later. Just then, my mom came out from the kitchen. A woman with that much money isn't safe. Why don't you give the bank account information to me to hold on to? You can get it when you need it. I looked at my mom. I've already deposited it, Mom. I can keep track of the paperwork myself. She smiled, but the corners of her mouth were tight. I'm just worried about you. Your mind is all over the place right now. What if someone talks you into a bad investment and you lose it all? I'm not giving the money to anyone, Mom. The air on the porch suddenly grew heavy. My dad quickly intervened. She was just asking. Anyway, if a daughter is in trouble, her parents' home won't abandon her. My mom turned to him, her voice sharp as if I wasn't there. It's not like I'm kicking her out. I forced a laugh. I didn't think that, Mom. But inside me, the first hairline crack had just appeared. That night, I laid a mat on the floor next to Annie in the room that was once mine. On the wall, the pencil marks where I'd tracked my height at 16 were still visible. The only difference was that the closet was now filled with Tyler's tools, and the desk was piled high with wires and electronic components. Annie turned and wrapped her arms around mine. Mommy, does Grandma love me? I stroked her hair. Of course, she does. Grandma loves Annie. So, are we going to live here forever, Mommy? I stared at the ceiling, stained by time, listening to the sound of my mom closing the kitchen door, my dad coughing on the porch, and Tyler laughing on the phone in the next room. I don't know yet, honey, but for now, we'll stay here. Annie closed her eyes, reassured. I lay still for a long time, forcing myself to believe that the stares, the questions, and even the piece of meat at dinner were just minor things. Some homes still have the same roof, the same kitchen, the same parents' voices, but the person who returns no longer has the same place they once did. In the middle of the night, I woke up when Annie shifted. Her small hand was searching for her water bottle. She was thirsty, but her eyes remained closed, her lips whispering, Mommy. I gently freed my arm from her grasp, got out of bed, and felt my way to the kitchen. The house was so quiet I could hear the sound of my slippers on the tile. I was about to turn on the light when I heard my mom's voice from the living room. What kind of daughter doesn't know how to keep her husband? He had a house, a car, gave her money every month, and she still let him run off with someone else. My hand froze in midair. Sarah, keep your voice down. She just got here. Stop bringing it up. What do you mean it was all her fault? You always take her side. He doesn't gamble, doesn't drink, doesn't let his wife and child go hungry. What more could she want? A woman needs to know how to be gentle. A husband comes home from work to a sour face, who would put up with that? I stood behind the wooden partition, my back cold. My mom didn't know about the nights I held a sick child until dawn while my husband was in a hotel with someone else. The most painful part wasn't that she didn't know, but that she never once asked. My dad sighed. Whatever happened, she's still our daughter. We need to take care of her and the little one now. My mom let out a dry laugh. Take care of them with what? Before, Vince would give us a few $100s on holidays. When your back was acting up, he sent money for your medicine. Now that they're divorced, this family has lost that support. From the other room, Tyler's voice cut in. He hadn't been asleep after all. Mom's right, Dad. Vince even promised to get me an interview at his friend's company. Now that Leah blew it up and he's marrying someone else, who's going to look out for us? My dad snapped quietly. You worry about your own education. Don't blame your sister, Tyler scoffed. If I have to worry about it myself, where are you going to get the money for my next semester's tuition? My car is about to fall apart, and I have to drive that thing to my internship? His voice lowered. Leah has $25,000. It wouldn't kill her to give us a little. My mom lowered her voice. She's holding onto that bank account like it's her lifeline. I asked to hold it for her this afternoon, and she was already on guard. Tyler spoke immediately, not even trying to be quiet. If she doesn't want to help, then let her rent her own place. My room is full of my stuff, and now she and her kid are just taking it over. I had hoped my mom would scold him, even just a little. But her voice was colder than the rain earlier that evening. Honestly, if it weren't for that $25,000 she's holding, I'd have told her to find her own place to stay. This house isn't a shelter for women their husbands don't want. I dug my nails into the wall. It turned out the home I had just used to comfort my daughter was just a calculation. I was welcomed back not because I was their daughter, but because I had a valuable bank account. My dad was silent for a moment, then said, That's a cruel thing to say, Sarah. Cruel? She comes back here, and people will say we have a divorced daughter. Tyler isn't married yet, with that kind of reputation in the neighborhood. Who would let their daughter marry him? I wanted to step out and ask what my divorce had to do with Tyler getting married. But I remembered Annie sleeping in the room, so I swallowed my words, got a glass of water, and went back. Annie was lying with her small feet sticking out from under the blanket. I pulled it up for her and sat leaning against the headboard. I didn't cry until morning. Some pain goes so deep that tears can't flow. The next morning, my mom woke up early to make oatmeal with minced pork for Annie. She scooped it into the little fish-shaped bowl, blew on it to cool it, and called Annie to come eat. Annie, Grandma made breakfast. If I hadn't heard the conversation last night, I might have still believed my mom was just clumsy with her words, not cruel in her heart. As Annie ate, she boasted, Grandma, last night I dreamed our house had a slide. My mom smiled at her granddaughter, then turned to me. Leah, give me your bank statement later. I have a friend at the bank who can get you a better interest rate. I put my glass down. It's in a fixed-term CD, Mom. If I withdraw it early, I'll lose the interest. I can manage it. I'm not going to take your money. Why are you so defensive? I didn't say you would, but that money is for Annie's future. My mom's face hardened. Everything is about Annie. What about your father, your brother, and me? I guess we're not family. I never said that. When you and Dad need something legitimate, I'll help within my means. But I'm not giving this account to anyone to hold. Tyler walked in from the yard, catching the last sentence, and burst out laughing. You act like we're a bunch of thieves, Leah. You get a little money, and suddenly you're talking a different language. He pulled out a chair and grabbed a hard-boiled egg from the plate. Living in someone else's house, but hoarding your money. If you and your kid didn't have that account, who would put up with you for long? The kitchen fell silent. My mom scolded Tyler weakly. Watch your mouth. But the words had already landed squarely in front of Annie. She stopped chewing and looked from her uncle to me. Mommy, what does put up with mean? Annie tugged at my sleeve. Are we just staying here? When the money runs out, will Grandma kick us out? Tyler kept his head down and continued eating as if nothing had happened. My mom awkwardly scooped more oatmeal. What do little kids know about that? Eat up. But Annie wouldn't open her mouth. She just looked at me, waiting for an answer. I lifted her into my lap. No one gets to treat us like something to be put up with, Annie. Do you understand? So, is this our house, Mommy? I was silent. A 4-year-old doesn't understand divorce settlements or self-respect. She just needs to know if the place she sleeps is a place where people truly want her to be. I could swallow what my mom said behind the partition. I could ignore Tyler's attitude. But I couldn't let my daughter grow up watching her mother bow her head just to have a place to sleep. They say blood is thicker than water. But if family only remembers you when they see your money, then sometimes the water from a stranger is clearer. I didn't argue for the rest of the day. I still helped my mom shell peas, hang the laundry, and dust the mantelpiece. I didn't tell my dad what I'd heard. He loved me, but his love was too weak to stand against my mom's words and Tyler's disrespect. That evening, I put Annie to bed early. She curled up next to me as if afraid that if she let go, this place too would disappear. I looked at my daughter's face under the nightlight, and a strange calm settled over me. I was no longer waiting for someone's permission to stay. Near dawn, as the first rooster in the neighborhood crowed, I sat up, pulled my suitcase from under the bed, and opened the old closet. I folded our clothes slowly, afraid the sound of the zipper would wake Annie. Our entire fortune at that moment fit into one small suitcase: a few sets of clothes, some packets of formula, and fever medicine, a worn-out stuffed rabbit, and the blanket she still hugged every night. Annie's birth certificate, the divorce decree, my ID, and the bank statement for the $25,000 were placed in a waterproof bag. Outside, the early morning wind rustled through the tomato vines. I pulled the suitcase into the living room and stopped in front of my parents' bedroom door. The nightlight cast a sliver of light from under the door. I heard my dad cough, then the sound of my mom shifting in bed. If I knocked, maybe she would ask me to stay. My hand was raised, but Annie's question from yesterday echoed in my mind. Mommy, if the money runs out, will Grandma kick us out? I lowered my hand. Some doors, if opened only to beg for pity, are better left closed. It's better to walk away on your own. I went back in and gently lifted Annie. She rubbed her face against my neck. Mommy, where are we going? We're going to find a new home, sweetheart. But it's not morning yet. We're going early, while it's still cool. Annie hugged her rabbit to her chest, let me put her jacket on, and I carried her outside. When I opened the gate, the hinges creaked loudly. I stood still for a few seconds, but the house remained silent. I placed the spare key on the doorstep next to a pot of geraniums. I didn't leave a note. At the end of the street, an older taxi driver was already waiting. He helped tie my suitcase to the back and asked, "To the bus station, ma'am?" "Yes, but please take me to the stop for the bus to Pasadena." The car rolled down the village road, still wet with puddles. I looked back once. The old house receded behind the hibiscus hedge and then disappeared completely. We reached the bus stop just as the sky began to lighten. I bought Annie a carton of milk and a hot tea for myself. She asked, "Mommy, does Grandma know we left?" "She'll know soon." "Will she be sad?" "Maybe." "Then why didn't we say goodbye?" I stroked her hair. I was afraid it would wake her up. "When we're settled, I'll call." The bus arrived close to 6 a.m. I chose 2 seats near the window, placed the file folder at my feet, and wrapped the strap around my wrist. As the bus left Conroe, the fields were still covered in a thin mist. My phone rang. The caller ID said Dad. "Leah, where are you going?" "I'm taking Annie to Pasadena to find a place." "Why did you leave without saying goodbye?" I swallowed a lump in my throat. I was afraid if I said anything, I wouldn't be able to leave. My dad was silent for a moment. "I know your mother's words are hard, and your brother, I'll talk to him." "Come back, Leah. It's hard to raise a child alone in a rental." I looked at my daughter, her head resting on my shoulder. "I can handle hard, Dad. But I don't want Annie to grow up thinking her mother is a burden." "No one thinks that." He still didn't know what I had heard behind the kitchen wall. "I know you love me, Dad. But every time Mom and Tyler hurt me, you just tell me to let it go. I've let go too many times." On the other end of the line, my dad sighed. "I'm sorry." Those 2 words made my eyes burn. "Take care of yourself, Dad. When we're settled, I'll bring Annie to visit." My mom snatched the phone. "Leah, what are you doing? After a few words, you just run off with the child? The neighbors will find out and laugh in our faces." My heart suddenly went cold. "You're worried about what people will say. I'm just worried about Annie hearing more things she shouldn't have to. No one was kicking you out. You don't have to say the word kick to kick someone out, Mom. She was silent. I didn't take anything from the house. I left the key on the doorstep. When we're settled, I'll call. I hung up. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Annie looked up. Was Grandma yelling at you, Mommy? No, sweetheart. She was just worried. She touched my cheek. Don't cry, Mommy. I quickly wiped my tears away. I'm not crying. The wind just blew in my eye. Annie tilted her head. But the window is closed. How can there be wind? I managed a laugh through my tears. You're too smart for your own good, catching me in a lie. On the way, I called 2 old friends. One was living with her in-laws, so it wasn't convenient for me and Annie to stay. The other advised me, Leah, it's tough for a single woman to raise a child. Whatever your mom says, just try to bear it. Having a roof over your head is better than nothing. I thanked her and hung up. Having a roof over your head, but having to watch every expression at the dinner table, having to remember you're an unwanted guest with every night's sleep. That roof might keep out the rain, but it couldn't shield your self-respect. I found the number for Mrs. Rosa Martinez, the landlady of the apartment complex where I lived when I first graduated. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. Hello? Who is this? Mrs. Martinez? It's Leah. Leah Miller. I used to rent the apartment at the end of the hall. The other end was quiet for a few seconds. Then her voice rose. Leah, the accountant? The one who used to buy me breakfast tacos on Sunday mornings? Yes, that's me. I'm on a bus to Pasadena and, with my little girl. Do you have any vacant apartments? She didn't ask where my husband was or why I was traveling alone with my child. The one at the end is empty. It's small, hot, and you have to share the laundry room, but it's clean. You can have it if you want. I have the security deposit. Please charge me the full price. Mrs. Martinez laughed warmly. Be poor, but don't let anyone think you're begging. When you get to the corner, call me. I'll come help. Around noon, the bus stopped at a junction in Pasadena. The heat radiated from the pavement. Trucks and construction vehicles drove past in a continuous stream. Mrs. Martinez was waiting under an awning at the corner, wearing an old floral dress, her hair in a high bun. As soon as she saw me, she grabbed the suitcase handle. Give that here. You hold the child. Annie whispered in my ear. Who is that, Mommy? That's Mrs. Martinez, our new landlady. Mrs. Martinez turned back and smiled. The place is tiny, you know. Annie hugged my neck and answered honestly. Tiny is okay, as long as Mommy and I are together. Mrs. Martinez paused, then turned and walked ahead. We followed her deep into the complex. The sounds of sizzling pans, children calling for their mothers, sewing machines and motorcycles all blended together. The apartment at the end of the hall came into view with its peeling iron door and a small window looking out onto a line of laundry. I stood at the threshold, holding Annie close. It was cramped, hot, and lacked everything. But for the first time in years, I knew the place I was about to enter was one I had chosen for myself, with my own 2 feet. Mrs. Martinez opened the iron door, pushing it hard with her shoulder. The hinges squealed, and dust fell from the frame. This place has been empty for almost a month. See if it suits you. I stepped inside. The room was barely more than 100 square feet, just enough for a metal bed frame, a small table, and a discolored plastic wardrobe. The ceiling fan made a clacking sound with each rotation, like an old man's cough. Annie looked around and asked, Is this our home, Mommy? Yes, for now. This is our home. Does it have a lock? I paused. She didn't ask if the house was pretty or ugly, only if it could be locked. Yes, Mommy will lock it tight at night. No one can get in. Annie nodded and placed her stuffed rabbit on the bed as if she had just chosen a spot for a family member. Rent is $750 a month, plus a 1-month deposit. I transferred $1,500 to Mrs. Martinez from the cash I had in my checking account. I hadn't touched the $25,000 savings. Mrs. Martinez watched me make the payment and said, If you're ever short on rent, it's better to be a few days late than to borrow from a payday lender. It's easier to get into that trouble than to get out. Yes, ma'am. I'll do my best to pay on time. Before she left, she handed me a new lock. The old one is loose. I'm replacing it for you two. I tried to refuse, but she waved her hand. When you're doing better, you can buy me a bowl of pho. I smiled. It was the first time I had genuinely smiled since leaving my parents' house. That afternoon, I bought a woven mat, a plastic basin, 2 bowls, and a used rice cooker from a tenant at the other end of the complex. Annie sat on the floor, drawing on newspaper. "When are we getting a TV?" "When Mommy has more money. I can watch on your phone then." I stroked her head. A child's good behavior during a parent's hardship is what breaks a mother's heart the most. I put all my important documents in the waterproof bag, wrapped it in another layer of cloth, and hid it at the bottom of the suitcase. After the divorce, these papers with official stamps were often more reliable protectors than the promises of relatives. The next morning, I left Annie with Jessica, a student in the early childhood education program who lived in the next room. Jessica was only 21, petite, and talked as fast as popping popcorn. "You go to work, Miss Leah. My classes are in the afternoon, so I can watch her in the mornings. Annie is a little shy with new people. Please be gentle with her." Jessica squatted down to Annie's eye level. "Annie, want to stay with me and draw princesses?" Annie clutched my hand tightly. "Mommy, where are you going?" "Mommy is going to work. I'll be back before lunch. Are you sure?" I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I'm sure. I promise." From 5 a.m., I helped out at a breakfast taco stand at the end of the street. I chopped cilantro, sliced cucumbers, cracked eggs, wrapped tacos, and washed the griddle. The stand was busy with construction workers, so my hands barely stopped moving. The first batch of eggs I made, I broke the yolks, and hot oil splattered onto my wrist, stinging painfully. But it deepened, Titapulan A.M. The owner still paid me the full amount and wrapped up a plain bean and cheese taco for me. "Take this home for your daughter." I took the taco, my throat tight as I said thank you. My daughter's breakfast that day was earned by standing over a hot griddle for 3 hours, but it felt lighter than any money given with an attitude of charity. Near noon, I went to clean a small real estate office. In the afternoon, I washed glasses at a coffee shop near the industrial park. The dish soap seeped into the small cuts on my hands, making them red and raw. Some days, I wanted to just lie down on the floor the moment I got back to the room. But as soon as she heard my footsteps in the hallway, Annie would run out. "Mommy's home!" She would throw herself around my legs, as happy as if I'd been gone for a month. "Did you eat, sweetheart?" Jessica gave me rice and eggs. "I saved half for you." Jessica stood behind her, smiling. She refused to eat the whole thing. She said her mommy must be hungry from working. Every night, I recorded every expense in a notebook. Rent, childcare for Annie, food, milk, electricity, water. I wrote down every dollar, every 50 cents. I understood that being poor wasn't as scary as not knowing where your money was going. Annie's anxiety gradually became more apparent. If I was in the shared bathroom for a little too long, she would run to the door and call out, "Mommy, are you still there?" One evening, a man in the hallway was drunkenly yelling at his wife. Annie jumped and crawled into a corner of the bed, covering her ears with both hands. I held her in my arms. "No one is yelling at us, sweetheart. Is Daddy going to come take you away?" My heart clenched. "No one is going to take me away. I'm staying with you." "Really? Really?"
To ease her fears, I took an old cookie tin, covered it with colored paper, and called it the Mommy's return box. Every day that I went to work and came back as promised, Annie got to stick a star on the lid. The first day, she stuck the star on crookedly and asked, "If I get lots of stars, you won't leave any more, right?" I smiled, though my heart ached. "I won't leave even if there are no stars. The stars are just to help you remember that Mommy always comes back." One night, it rained heavily, and water dripped from the tin roof right into the middle of the room. I frantically placed a basin to catch the water, moved our mat, and dragged the suitcase to a dry corner. The sound of the rain on the roof was like 100 people knocking on the door. Annie sat on the bed, hugging her knees. "Mommy, is our house crying?" I placed another pot under a leak, trying to sound cheerful. "No, our house is just taking a shower." "But it's not taking its clothes off to shower?" I burst out laughing. "Our house is a little shy." Annie laughed too, using a towel to wipe up the droplets that splashed onto the floor. The two of us dodged the basins and pots as if we were playing an obstacle course. By midnight, the rain subsided. Annie slept in my arms, her hand still tightly clutching the hem of my shirt. I looked at the damp room, my raw hands, and the expense notebook by my pillow. This new life wasn't easy.
But at least in this room, No one asked me how much money I brought home to deserve a place to stay. The next morning, as I was struggling to carry a large water jug from the front of the complex, a man driving a sedan stopped in front of my door. He took the jug from my hands, smiling warmly. "Let me get that. A woman with a child shouldn't be lugging this around. You'll throw out your back." I didn't know then that in times of hardship, some hands reach out to help you up, while others are just waiting for you to lose your balance. The man's name was Craig. He was in his late 30s, drove for a ride-sharing service near the industrial park, and lived at the end of our row. He left early and came back late, always neatly dressed, and his words were as sweet as honey. He placed the water jug in the corner and dusted off his hands. "If you need anything heavy moved, just call me. We're neighbors. Don't be a stranger." I thanked him. Craig pulled a small carton of chocolate milk from his pocket and offered it to Annie. "Here you go, little one. This is for you." Annie didn't take it, just looked at me. I shook my head. "Thank you, but she already has milk." The smile on Craig's face faltered. "You're too cautious. It's not like I'm going to hurt anyone." "It's not that. I'm just teaching her not to take things from strangers." Craig laughed loudly. "We live in the same complex. How are we strangers?" After he left, Mrs. Martinez, who was sweeping the courtyard, came over to my door. "You keep an eye on that, Craig. If he helps, thank him, but don't let him get too involved in your business." "Is there something wrong with him, Mrs.?" Martinez shrugged. "I haven't caught him doing anything wrong with my own eyes. But as they say, on a slippery road, watch your step. With a person who's too nice, watch their hands. It's better to be cautious." In the following days, Craig appeared at strangely convenient times. One day he'd accidentally bought too much milk. Another day he offered to give me a ride to the cafe. I always politely refused. I didn't want to be indebted to a man I didn't know well. One evening, I came back from the cafe to find Craig sitting on his car hood in front of my door. He handed me a business card with only a phone number on it. "I know a place that would be a good fit for you. Easy work, good money." "What kind of work?" "Entertaining clients." I looked him straight in the eye. "What kind of entertaining?" Craig lowered his voice. "Just regular clients. Have a drink. Sing some karaoke. If someone wants to go somewhere private, you accommodate them a little. A woman with your looks could make in one night what you make in a week washing glasses." I handed the card back. "I'm not interested," Craig sneered. "A divorced woman with a kid, living in a dump like this. How long do you think your money will last? I'm offering you a way out and you're being picky." I kept my voice calm. "I may be poor, but I'm not selling my self-respect. Please don't bring this up again." His face darkened. "You've already been married once. Stop acting so high and mighty. People call that delusional these days." I opened my door and pulled Annie inside. "Are you finished? If you are, then please move away from my door." Craig stood up and scoffed. "We'll see how long you last." 2 days later, as I was hanging laundry, I overheard 2 women from the other end of the row talking quietly. "Did you hear? That Leah woman, her husband left her because she was cheating?" "Really? She seems so quiet. Craig said she was fooling around even when she was married. Now she's just using the kid to get more money." My hand, which was clipping Annie's shirt to the line, froze. I turned around. "Where did you hear that?" The 2 women jumped. One of them laughed nervously. "I just heard people talking. I don't know if it's true. If you don't know if it's true, then why are you spreading it around? It doesn't make you look any better." I brought my laundry basket back inside. My back was straight, but my hands were shaking so much I dropped a clothespin. That afternoon, Annie came back from playing outside with red, swollen eyes. I knelt down. "Who made you cry?" She bit her lip. "Timmy said you were bad, so Daddy left you." "Is that true, Mommy? Are you bad?" I felt a sharp pain in my chest and pulled her into a hug. "No, sweetheart. Mommy is not bad." "Then why did they say that?" "Some people like to talk about things they don't understand, just like Timmy." "What other people say doesn't make you a bad person. Do you understand?" Annie nodded. "Can I still play with him?" "Yes. But if he says that again, you tell him that grown-up problems are for grown-ups to talk about, and he shouldn't say things that hurt people." That evening, Mrs. Martinez brought over a bowl of squash soup. She looked at my face and asked, "What did that Craig do?" I told her about the business card and the rumors. She slammed the bowl down on the table. I knew it. If he can't get you, he'll sling mud. The next morning, while the whole complex was doing their laundry, Mrs. Martinez called Craig out. You, come here. I want to talk to you. Craig put his hands on his hips. What's up, Mrs. M? Mrs. Martinez pointed a finger right at his face. About you going around spreading rumors that Leah cheated on her husband. Craig scoffed. I just heard people talking. Who? Your own mouth. That's who. She's a single mother working from morning till night. If you can't help her, then at least don't use your mouth as a weapon. The entire laundry area went silent. Jessica came out of her room. I watch Annie every day, miss. Leah goes to work on time and comes home on time. What you're saying is slander. Craig's face turned red. You're all ganging up on me. I didn't name any names. I stepped forward, holding my phone. You texted me, suggesting inappropriate work. After I refused, these rumors started. I've screenshotted everything. Craig took a half step forward. What are you going to do? I didn't back down. If you text me again, harass me, or spread any more rumors about me, I will report it to the police. He laughed menacingly. You're going to report that to the police? Who do you think you are? I am someone who has the right to protect her reputation and her child's safety. That afternoon, Craig sent another text. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Watch your back if you want to keep living here. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, printed it at a copy shop, and went with Mrs. Martinez to the local police precinct to file a report. Craig was called in. There was no big scene, but he had to sign an agreement stating he would not harass, threaten, or continue to spread rumors about me. From that day on, Craig would turn his face away whenever he saw me. The rumors in the complex also died down. I learned another lesson. Silence at the right time is patience, but silence in the face of someone who makes a game of your reputation only makes them think you can't feel pain. On Sunday evening, I took Annie to a small park near a pond. She sat on a bench, coloring a house with a red roof on a piece of scrap paper. I sat beside her, watching as she carefully drew an extra-large door. Just then, someone stopped in front of me and called my name in a surprised voice. Leah, is that you? I looked up. The man standing before me was wearing a light blue polo shirt and holding 2 bottles of water. His face was both familiar and strange. After nearly 10 years, it took me a few seconds to recognize him. It was Dan. Daniel Roberts laughed. Good. I'm not so old that you've forgotten me completely. Dan had been in some of the same classes as me in community college. We were in the same group for a managerial accounting project. He was the one who was always late to class, but finished the assignments faster than anyone. After graduation, I heard he went to work in logistics for a company in Pasadena, and then we lost touch. He looked at Annie, who was still coloring on the bench. Your daughter? Yes. Her name is Annabelle, but we call her Annie. He sat down, leaving a respectful distance between us. He didn't stare at the old shirt I was wearing or ask why I had gotten so thin. He offered me one of the water bottles. I bought an extra. Would you like it? I took it. He placed the other bottle next to Annie. I'll leave this here for you. You can drink it when your mommy says it's okay. Annie looked up at me. I nodded and she whispered, Thank you, sir. The way Dan handled it put me at ease. He didn't try to win over my child with forced enthusiasm or use a carton of milk to buy his way into her mother's story. Dan looked at the picture Annie was coloring. That's a beautiful house. Why is the door so big? Annie answered very matter-of-factly, so Mommy can see me when she comes home from work. The smile on Dan's face faded. He glanced at me but didn't ask any questions in front of her. A little later, when Annie ran off to the slide, Dan finally spoke. Are you living nearby? I'm renting an apartment at the end of the street. I just moved here a little while ago. And work? I hesitated, then briefly told him I was helping at the taco stand, cleaning an office, and washing dishes by the hour. I didn't talk about my parents or about Craig, or use my divorce as a reason to ask for pity. After listening, Dan just asked, Are you looking for something more stable? I gave a sad smile. Of course. But I haven't worked in an office for almost 4 years. I've probably forgotten all the software, and I have a young child. A lot of companies are hesitant about that. My company is hiring a data entry clerk for the warehouse. No night shifts, regular business hours, but the pressure to be accurate is high. I looked at him. Are you going to try to get me the job? Dan immediately shook his head. I'm not getting you the job. I'm just giving you the information and telling you where to submit your application. Whether they hire you is up to you. His answer made me pause. After so many days of being seen as a pitiful woman, the thing I feared most was the word help. Some help comes with the price of having to be lesser than the person giving it. But Dan was just opening a door, not pulling me through it. I'm worried people at the company will think I'm using a connection. I work in warehouse operations. I have no say in hiring. The person who will interview you is Miss Hayes from HR. She's notoriously tough. Even if I wanted to pull strings, I couldn't. I laughed. Hearing you say that actually makes me feel better. Life is strange sometimes. You doubt the easy path and feel relieved by the hard one. Dan took out his phone and sent me the company's address and a list of the documents I needed. Before he left, he said, "You were always good with numbers. Being out of the game for a few years doesn't mean you've lost it." I looked down at my hands. The tips of my fingers were still red from the dish soap. When you've been away from something for too long, sometimes you forget what you're capable of. Dan replied, "Then go and find out. One interview won't make you any less of a person. Not trying is what will keep you stuck." That night, after Annie was asleep, I sat with my old laptop and started putting together my resume. The first part was easy, but when I got to the experience section, my fingers paused. For the past 4 years, I had no company name to write down. All I had were sleepless nights with a feverish child, months of calculating the budget to make it to the end of the month, and dinners cooked while trying to soothe a crying baby. Those things had made me more patient, more careful, and more resilient. But on a resume, all anyone would see was a blank space. Jessica sat next to me, helping me format my resume picture. Don't overthink it. Just state clearly that you worked in accounts receivable, entered invoices, and tracked payments. As for the gap, just be honest and say you were raising your child. I'm worried they'll think I'm out of touch. Maybe. But you can't hide it anyway. Just be truthful. If they look down on you for it, you wouldn't want to work there anyway. I had to smile. You're only 21, but you talk like you're an old soul. Jessica put her hands on her hips. I'm studying early childhood education. I deal with high-level crises every day. One kid cries, and 5 others follow. No company is as stressful as a room full of 3-year-olds. Her words lightened the mood. I dug out my diploma, my computer certifications, and my old employment verification letters. The nicest outfit I owned was an old white blouse and black dress pants. I washed them that evening, hung them in front of the fan, and ironed them in the morning with a small travel iron I borrowed from Mrs. Martinez. On the day of the interview, Jessica watched Annie for me. When Annie saw me dressed up, she asked, "Are you going to a wedding, Mommy?" "I'm going for a job interview. If you get the job, will you still come home?" I knelt down and linked my pinky with hers. "Yes, I'll be home this afternoon." Annie thought for a moment, then took a star from her box and stuck it on my hand. "You can borrow this, so you won't be scared." I hugged her, trying to hide my teary eyes. The company was in an industrial park, with a line of trucks waiting to be loaded. The sound of barcode scanners and employees calling out lot numbers made me feel like I had stepped into a world that was once familiar but was now foreign. The person who interviewed me was Miss Locke and employees. Evelyn Hayes, the head of HR. She was in her 40s, wearing a simple tan blouse, with short hair and very sharp eyes. She looked at my resume and asked directly, "You've been out of the workforce for nearly 4 years. Why should we hire you instead of someone younger who is faster with the software?" I had prepared many answers, but in that moment, I didn't want to give a canned response. I don't know if the company should choose me, but if I'm given a chance, I will learn everything from the beginning and take responsibility for every mistake I make. Miss Hayes looked at me. "You have a young child. What happens if she gets sick?" "I've already found a daycare and have backup support when needed. I can't promise my daughter will never get sick, but I won't use my situation as an excuse to miss work without notice. The pressure in the warehouse is high. One wrong number can affect an entire shipment." I clasped my hands under the table. "I understand. I used to process orders and track payments. I may be slow at first, but I'm not careless." Miss Hayes turned another page in my file. "Why do you want to return to work?" The question made me think of the leaky room, Annie's hand clutching my shirt, and the words my mother had said behind the kitchen wall. But I didn't complain. I need a job to support my daughter on my own, and I don't want to live on anyone's pity. Miss Hayes looked up and held my gaze for a long time. No one here gets paid out of pity. Good. I wouldn't want to be hired for that reason. The corner of Miss Psychodin. Hayes's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. She handed me a basic data entry test. My hands were shaking so much on the first 2 lines that I typed the wrong code. I took a deep breath, deleted it, and started again. I finished slower than the person at the next desk, but I checked my work 3 times before submitting it. Near the end of the day, Miss Hayes called me in. The company will hire you for a 2-month probationary period in the warehouse data entry department. The salary is $2,800 a month, regular business hours. You start next week. I sat there, stunned, afraid I had misheard. You're saying I got the job? A probationary period isn't a guarantee. Don't celebrate too early. I nodded repeatedly. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Leaving the company gate, I stood under the shade of a large oak tree, and tears started streaming down my face. Not because that salary would instantly change my life, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at me and seen a capable person. When Dan texted to ask how it went, I replied briefly, I got the probationary offer. He replied, Congratulations. Remember to buy a notebook and a pen tomorrow. On the first day, people always forget the little things. I stopped at a convenience store and bought a blue notebook. On the bus ride back to my apartment, I opened the first page and wrote, I don't need anyone to save me. I just need myself not to give up. That afternoon, Annie ran to the door. Seeing the star still on my hand, she cheered, You brought the star back. I lifted her up. Yes, and I brought back a job too. She didn't understand what a salary or a probationary period was. She just hugged my neck and smiled brightly. And I knew that from tomorrow, life wouldn't get easier overnight, but at least I had found a door that I could walk through on my own 2 feet. On my first day of work, I arrived at the company nearly 40 minutes early. The security guard was still rolling up the warehouse doors. In the yard, only a few trucks were parked, waiting to be loaded. I stood in front of the glass doors of the main entrance, smoothed my collar, and reminded myself, today, you are not here to ask for anyone's pity. The data entry department had 4 people. My desk was by the window, across from a woman of about 28 named Megan. She looked me up and down and asked, You're the one Dan recommended, right? Dan told me about the opening, but I handled the application and interview myself. Megan smirked. I was just asking. The data here moves by the hour. Having a connection doesn't mean you can afford to be slow. I understood immediately that I wouldn't have a peaceful orientation period. That morning, the team lead showed me how to cross-reference packing slips with the codes in the system, check lot numbers, and locate shelf positions. I filled 3 pages in my notebook, but when it was time to work on my own, I still mistyped a character in a product code. Megan rolled her chair over and pointed at my screen. Look closer. That's a B, not the number 8. 1 wrong character and the warehouse staff will be searching all day. I'm sorry, I'll fix it right away. Saying sorry doesn't make the boxes move to the right shelf. A few people nearby turned to look. My face flushed, but I didn't argue. I corrected the code, rechecked the entire line of data, and wrote down my mistake in the blue notebook. At lunchtime, everyone went down to the cafeteria. I took out the container of leftover rice I'd brought from home and sat at a table in the back of the hallway. Miss Hayes walked by and saw me eating while reading the procedure manual. She stopped. Are you planning to study through your lunch break? I'm afraid I'll make another mistake this afternoon. Being careful is good, but an overworked mind is also prone to errors. Eat your lunch, take a 10-minute break, then you can review. I closed the notebook. Miss Hayes glanced at my container, which only had rice, a soy sauce marinated egg, and a few slices of cucumber. How was your first morning? I'm slower than everyone else. Being slow isn't the problem. Hiding your mistakes is. She walked away without offering any long-winded comfort, but her words eased some of my anxiety. That night, after giving Annie a bath and putting her to bed, I got on my phone and reviewed the software training documents. I used a red pen to note the mistakes I'd made and a blue pen for the corrections. Some nights, my eyes would grow so heavy that my head would nod onto the table. Annie would wake up and pull my arm. "Mommy, aren't you sleeping? Just studying a little. But you're a grown-up. Why are you still in school? If grown-ups don't keep learning, life has a way of leaving them behind, honey." Annie didn't fully understand, but she took a small pillow and placed it behind my back. "Okay, but be a good student, Mommy." Work wasn't my only worry. I needed to find a reliable daycare for Annie because Jessica was about to start her student teaching internship and couldn't watch her all day. A private preschool near the apartment complex accepted children monthly, and the tuition was manageable if I budgeted carefully. The head teacher, Miss Holly Fisher, was a kindly woman with a gentle voice and eyes that made children feel safe. On the first day, Annie clung to my shirt. "Can you stay here until this afternoon?" "I have to go to work, sweetie." "I won't cry. You can just sit by the door." I knelt down to her level. "I promise I will come back to pick you up every single afternoon. You'll eat lunch, take a nap, and play with your friends. When you wake up, it will be almost time for me to come. Daddy used to say he'd come on the weekend, but he didn't." My throat tightened. Miss Fisher walked over but didn't try to pull Annie away from me. She just knelt beside her. "Annie, can you help me with something in the classroom? I have a new box of crayons, and I don't know how to organize them." Annie looked at her, then at me. I linked my pinky with hers. "I'll keep my promise." Annie slowly let go of my shirt. I turned and walked away quickly, afraid that if I looked at her for one more second, I wouldn't be able to leave. That afternoon, when I came to pick her up, Miss Fisher showed me a drawing Annie had made. In the picture, there was a house, a little girl sitting inside, and a mother standing outside the gate. She said quietly, "She's adjusting well, but she looks at the door a lot. I think she's afraid you won't come back." I smoothed the edge of the paper. "Our family has been through a lot of changes recently. Just keep your pickup time consistent. Children build trust through repetition, not long explanations." From that day on, no matter how busy I was at work, I tried to get to the school on time. Every time she saw me at the gate, Annie would run out as if she had just found her most precious treasure. Life was starting to find a new rhythm when Vince called. I was cooking squash soup, and Annie was coloring at the table. When the phone rang, she immediately asked, "Is that Daddy?" I looked at the screen, stepped out into the hallway, and then answered, "Is something wrong? I'm telling you this in advance so you know. Diana and I are getting married at the end of the year." I was silent for a few seconds, then said, "I wish you both well." Vince seemed surprised. "You don't have any questions? Your life is no longer my business. Just don't let it affect Annie." He cleared his throat. "Diana will be seeing her sometimes. Don't go putting any funny ideas in Annie's head. I have never spoken ill of you in front of our daughter. I'm just saying." I hung up and went back to the kitchen. The soup was still simmering, and Annie was still coloring the roof of her house yellow, but my hand holding the ladle was ice cold. That month, Vince transferred the full $800 on the 5th. The next month, I didn't receive the money until the 17th. He didn't give me any warning and didn't reply to my first 2 text messages. The following month, only $500 showed up in my account, with a message, "I'm busy with the wedding. You have the $25,000, so be understanding." I read and reread that message. Annie's tuition, food, and medicine in his eyes, all of that could shrink to accommodate the cost of a grown-up's wedding. I didn't call to argue. I screenshotted the message, downloaded the bank statement, and made a copy of the divorce decree and the child support agreement. Miss Hayes found out when I asked to leave an hour early. "Are you going to see your ex-husband? I want to clarify the terms of the child support." She gave me the number for a Miss Jenkins at the local legal aid society and advised me, "Don't turn your child's needs into a shouting match. Keep records, date everything, and communicate in writing." Miss Jenkins reviewed my documents and explained patiently, "The asset settlement you received after the divorce and the child support for your child are 2 separate matters. You are not asking your ex-husband for money. You are requesting that your child's father fulfill his legal responsibility. What if he keeps paying less?" I asked. "First, send a clear, written message and save all evidence. If he continues to intentionally underpay, we can guide you on the next steps. The important thing is not to let them use guilt to make you give up your child's rights. I sat there, stunned. Until now, every time I had to bring up money with Vince, I felt like I was begging. It turned out that what made me weak wasn't just the lack of money, but the lack of understanding of my own rights. To all of you listening, you probably realize that the biggest fear for a woman after divorce isn't necessarily poverty, but that others will use the phrase "for the sake of the child" to force her into continued silence. If you were in my shoes, would you stay quiet to keep the peace, or would you clarify things in black and white? Please leave a comment below and continue listening. Because some people only learn to be afraid when the woman they once looked down upon no longer bows her head. That evening, after Annie was asleep, I laid out all the documents on the table. I drafted a text message, deleting it twice because the words were still too full of anger. On the third try, I kept only the essential facts. I looked at Vince's name on the screen and hit send. For the first time since the divorce, I wasn't writing as a resentful ex-wife. I was writing as a mother protecting the rights of her daughter. The message I sent to Vince was only a few lines long. The $25,000 was the agreed upon asset settlement and initial support fund post-divorce. The $800 monthly child support is your separate legal obligation to Annie, to be transferred before the 5th of the month as stipulated in the decree. You are $300 short for this month. Please transfer the remaining amount and adhere to the agreement going forward. If you are facing genuine financial difficulty, please communicate this formally in writing. I read it one last time and placed the phone face down on the table. Less than 2 minutes later, it buzzed incessantly. Vince was calling. I glanced at the bed. Annie was asleep, one leg thrown over her stuffed rabbit, her lips moving as if talking in a dream. I took the phone, stepped into the hallway, closed the door quietly, and then answered. Vince's voice hit me immediately. What kind of message was that? I sent a message with the necessary information. It's a few $100s and you're acting like I'm stiffing my own kid. It's not about a few hundred or a few thousand. The issue is that you unilaterally decided to pay less without any notice. Vince scoffed. You're sitting on a pile of money and you're counting pennies. I'm getting ready for a wedding. I have a lot of expenses. Can't you be a little understanding? I leaned against the cool wall of the hallway, trying to keep my voice even. Your wedding is your choice as an adult. Annie's food, tuition, and medicine can't wait until after you're married. She lives with you, so you have a responsibility to support her too. Don't push everything onto me. I have never pushed everything onto you. I go to work, I pay our rent, and I take care of our daughter every single day. I am only asking you to do what you signed your name to. Vince was quiet for a few seconds. Then his voice turned colder. So now you know a few legal terms and you're going to talk down to me? I gripped the phone tighter. I'm not talking down. I'm just done looking down. The other end of the line went silent. In the past, if Vince had raised his voice, I would have rushed to explain, begged him not to be angry, and wondered what I had done wrong. But that night, I no longer felt the need to prove my compliance. Vince lowered his voice, each word laced with annoyance. Don't think that just because you have primary custody, you can do whatever you want. I have my own house, a car, and an income several times yours. If I were to fight for custody of Annie, you're not guaranteed to win. My heart pounded. Even though Miss Jenkins had briefly explained this, hearing Vince himself threaten to take our daughter sent a chill from my spine down to my feet. I looked through the crack in the door. Annie was still asleep, her small shadow cast on the water-stained wall. I took a breath and replied, If you want to file a petition, then follow the proper procedures. I won't beg. Vince probably didn't expect me not to panic. You seem pretty confident. I may not have a big house, but I am the one who takes Annie to the doctor when she's sick, picks her up from school on time, cares for her every day, and has never abandoned her to start a new life. I also have records of every month you paid late, paid short, and the text message where you used your wedding as an excuse. Are you spying on me? I'm keeping evidence to protect my child. Vince laughed, a sound full of rage. Unbelievable. It's only been a few months since the divorce and you've turned into a different person. No, I'm still the same person. You were just used to me not daring to speak up. Just as I finished, I heard a woman's voice near the phone. Let me talk to her, honey. It was Diana. Vince didn't turn off the speaker. Her voice, sweet but sharp, came through clearly. Leah, I think you should calm down. Vince isn't abandoning his daughter. It's just that we have a lot to prepare for this month. I asked. In what capacity are you involving yourself in the child support arrangements between a father and his child? Diana paused, then gave a light laugh. I'm about to become his wife. Annie will be spending time at our house in the future. I just want things to be civil. Civil is honoring a signed agreement, not using a wedding as an excuse to cut a child's support. Diana's voice began to lose its softness. There's no need for that tone. $25,000 is not a small amount. Anyone would think Vince left you and your daughter with nothing. I have never said he left me with nothing. Then you should think about the child's future. Don't let your pride get in the way. A child needs a father, not just money. I closed my eyes for a second. You're right, a child needs a father. But a father isn't someone who only shows up when it's sunny and convenient. A father also needs to keep his word, ask if his child is sick, know what school she goes to, and not cut her support to pay for his wedding party. Diana was silent. I continued. And you, if you truly are thinking about Annie's future, please don't use the phrase, for the child, to pressure her mother into closing her eyes to the father's responsibilities. Vince grabbed the phone back. Are you done? I'm done. The remaining balance for this month needs to be transferred by the end of the week. From next month, you will adhere to the agreed-upon date. If you continue to make unauthorized deductions, I will file a formal request as instructed. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. And frankly, if you do that, don't blame me for not being sentimental. I looked at the peeling paint on my apartment door. You and I are divorced. I don't need your sentiment. I just need you not to trivialize our daughter's rights. I hung up first. When the screen went dark, my knees felt weak. I had to hold on to the railing to stay standing. The hand holding the phone was slick with sweat, and my heart was beating so fast it hurt. I wasn't as strong as my voice had just sounded. I was afraid Vince would really fight for custody, afraid my probationary salary would be used against me, afraid that one day Annie would be taken from this tiny room just because her father had a nicer apartment. But the fear no longer made me want to run back and beg Vince for forgiveness. I opened my phone, noted the time and main points of the call, and screenshotted the sent message. As Miss Jenkins had told me, when it comes to a child's rights, don't just keep it in your head. Create a paper trail. A moment later, a text from Vince came through. I'll transfer the rest tomorrow, but don't push your luck. I didn't argue. I just replied, acknowledged. Please transfer as per the agreement. The next morning, my bank account showed an additional deposit of $300. I stared at the number for a long time. Not because I was happy to get the money, but because for the first time, I understood that I didn't have to scream and cry to force someone to respect a boundary. Annie woke up, pattered out, and rubbed her eyes. Mommy, what are you doing out here? I put my phone away, just watching the sunrise. She looked up. A thin sliver of morning light was cutting through the space above the tin roofs. Are you going to pick me up on time today? Yes. When Mommy makes a promise, she keeps it. Annie wrapped her arms around my waist and then ran inside to find her school clothes. I stood by the door for a few more seconds. Last night, I was hurt, scared, and trembling. But I had understood something. Being calm isn't about not feeling pain anymore. It's about not handing the steering wheel of your life back to the person who once let you sink, even when you're in the middle of a storm. On Monday morning, as soon as I swiped my keycard, I could tell the atmosphere in the office was different. The desk phones were ringing off the hook, warehouse staff were rushing back and forth, and the operations team lead was standing in the middle of the aisle with a stack of shipping orders, his face taut. Before I could even put my bag down, Megan called out, Leah, come look at this. On her screen was a list for a shipment of water purifiers and electric stoves that had just been delivered to a retailer in West Texas. The total value was nearly $48,000. The code in the system indicated grade A stock, but when the client opened the crates, they found that nearly a third of the items were defective products that had been marked to be returned to the supplier. I looked at the last data entry log and saw my username. My heart skipped a beat. That's impossible. I cross-checked that lot before I left. Megan crossed her arms. The system says your account changed the code. Did the computer do it by itself? I need to see the detailed edit history. The operations lead walked over, his voice heavy. Leah, your account was used to change the product status from return to vendor to Approved for shipment. The client is demanding compensation, and the company has had to put a hold on their payment and send a truck to retrieve the entire shipment. I listened to his words, my hands turning cold. I didn't make that change, Megan said, just loud enough to sound like a comment but clear enough for everyone to hear. People with young kids are often distracted. Probably didn't get enough sleep, made a mistake, and doesn't remember. Another employee nearby added, new people often get overwhelmed with large shipments. I turned to Megan. You can suspect me, but until there's a conclusion, don't use my personal situation as evidence. Megan shrugged. I'm just mentioning a possibility. This isn't a place for people to get a second chance at life. That comment hit a raw nerve, but I didn't respond. Arguing now would only make me look like I was panicking and making excuses. Dan came in from the warehouse floor. He looked at the screen and asked, Leah, did you work on this lot alone? The team lead answered. She entered the data. Leo from receiving counted the items and gave her the slip. Dan turned to me. I'll ask management to review the process. I shook my head. Dan, don't defend me. Leah, this is serious. I know. But the more you speak up for me, the more they'll think I'm being protected because I know you. Dan looked at me for a few seconds and nodded. Okay. If you need anything, let me know. I won't interfere with the investigation. Miss Hayes called me into her office. On her desk was a blank incident report and a copy of the initial transaction history. She didn't scold or console me. You maintain that you did not change the code? Yes, I do, but it was your account. I understand. The company hasn't reached a conclusion. I'm giving you until the end of tomorrow to review everything. If there's no other evidence, the report will state the error originated from your account. I looked down at the paper. A small mistake in the past would have just been embarrassing, but this could cost me my job, require me to pay damages, and brand me as dishonest. I request to see the full login history, the keycard access data, and the security footage for the office area. Miss Hayes looked up. What are you looking for? The time the data was changed. If I wasn't in the building at that time, then someone else must have used my account. She leaned back in her chair. Granted. But if you were the one who let your password get compromised, you are still responsible. I will accept responsibility for my part, if any, but I will not accept blame for something I didn't do. That afternoon, I barely left my screen. The system log showed the data was altered at 8:16 p.m. on Friday. I remembered clearly that I had left work earlier than usual that day to take Annie for a follow-up on her throat infection. But memory wasn't evidence. I requested the keycard data from security. My card was swiped out at 5:42 p.m. with no re-entry. Megan stood behind me looking at the timesheet, her tone less sharp. Maybe you logged in remotely? The warehouse system is only accessible on the internal network. Then who has your password? That question stopped me. When I first started, the temporary password was a long string of letters and numbers that was hard to remember. I had jotted it down on the last page of my blue notebook. I had changed it since then, but I wasn't sure if the last change was before or after the incident. I flipped through my notebook and saw that a corner of the last page had been torn off. An image flashed in my mind. Leo Warner, the receiving clerk, standing behind my desk asking me to reprint a packing slip. I had been at the photocopier for a few minutes, and my notebook was open on my desk. Leo was the one responsible for counting that exact shipment. I found him in the packing area. He was signing off on a delivery and smiled when he saw me. What's up, Leah? Leo, were you back in the office on Friday night? His smile stiffened slightly. I went home in the afternoon. Are you sure? Yeah. Why the weird question? I didn't press further. An innocent person might be annoyed, but a guilty person could also feign calm. I needed something that couldn't lie. The hallway camera showed that at 7:58 p.m., Leo used a side door to enter the office area from the warehouse. He was there for nearly 30 minutes before leaving, holding a stack of papers. I watched the footage twice. At that same time, no other data entry staff were present. The next morning, I brought all the data to Miss Hayes' office. The login history, the keycard records, the camera footage, the work roster, and a photo of the torn page in my notebook. Miss Hayes asked, "Do you have proof that Leo took your password?" No, direct proof. But he was present at the exact time my account was used. He was in charge of that specific shipment. and he lied about going home early. Management called Leo in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. I just went back to get a delivery slip. I don't know Miss Miller's password. The head of the IT department brought up the device information. The data was changed from desktop computer number 3 right where Miss Miller sits. Leo swallowed hard. Miss Hayes placed the printout from the camera footage in front of him. You entered the office at nearly 8 p.m. You said you had left in the afternoon. Why did you lie? I was afraid of getting in trouble. I looked him straight in the eye. You once stood behind my desk when my notebook with the password was open. That corner of the page was later torn out. How do you explain that? Leo slammed his hand on the table. Don't pin this on me. You messed up and now you're looking for a scapegoat. Dan stood at the back of the room, silent. He was keeping his promise to me. The warehouse manager presented a supplementary inventory report. 3 crates of grade A stock had disappeared from the storage area, while a corresponding number of defective items were moved into the shipment lot. The camera in the loading bay showed Leo moving the 3 crates himself at the end of his shift, without a transfer order. His face went pale. After nearly an hour of cross-referencing, Leo finally bowed his head and admitted to colluding with an outside contact to swap 3 crates of good products, planning to sell them for cash. He used my account to change the product status, thinking that if anything went wrong, the blame would fall on the new employee who was still on probation. I sat in silence, listening, feeling a mix of anger and cold dread. A small piece of paper with a password, my carelessness had become a knife someone else used to push me off a cliff. The company suspended Leo immediately, sealed the relevant data, and forwarded the case to the authorities due to the evidence of theft. I also had to sign a formal warning for insecurely storing my password. I signed it without hesitation. I would accept my mistake, but I would not carry another person's crime. When I left the meeting room, Megan was waiting in the hallway. She avoided my eyes for a moment before saying, "I'm sorry." I didn't reply right away. Megan continued, "When I saw your username, I just assumed you did it. I even brought up you having a kid. That was out of line." I closed my notebook. I used to look at myself and think the same thing, that a woman who stayed home for years couldn't do anything right. Luckily, numbers don't have biases. Megan bit her lip and nodded slightly. That evening, I left the company after the warehouse lights had come on. For the first time, I didn't feel like the person Dan had recommended, or the divorced woman trying to beg for a place. I was the person who had found the truth herself, defended her own name, and had the courage to accept her share of the responsibility. Sometimes being backed into a corner isn't to make you fall, but to make you realize how much stronger your footing has become. 3 days after the incident with Leo, Miss Hayes called me to her office. I walked in, my heart still pounding. Although I had been cleared of any involvement in the product swap, I was still on probation. My carelessness with the password was a fact. The company could easily let me go to avoid future risk. Miss Hayes pushed a folder toward me, read this carefully, and then sign. I looked at the words at the top of the page and felt a wave of dizziness. A permanent employment contract? Yes. Management has decided to end your probationary period early. Your base salary will be $3,200 a month, not including lunch benefits. I sat in silence for a few seconds. Miss Hayes looked up. Is that too low? I quickly shook my head. No, I'm just so happy I don't know what to say. Then don't thank me. The company is signing you because you can do the work, not because we're handing out charity. Her tone was still brisk, but I knew it was the most sincere recognition I had received in years. I picked up the pen, read every clause, and signed my name. The first stroke was a little shaky, but the rest was steady. When I put the pen down, I felt as if I had just signed a new agreement with myself. From now on, I would not live by waiting for someone else's generosity. Out in the hallway, I called Jessica. "I'm buying groceries on the way home to cook tonight." "I got the permanent contract," Jessica squealed. "Really? Can I make a request?" "I want Thai hot pot," I laughed. "My celebration budget is about $20, Missy." "Okay, then scrambled eggs with green onions will do. The important thing is that there's money." That night, I bought half a chicken, a bunch of bok choy, and a small creme caramel. Mrs. Martinez brought over a bottle of soda, and Jessica brought a bag of fruit. Annie sat in the middle of the room wearing a paper crown she had made in class. "Did you get a promotion, Mommy?" "Not a promotion." I got made permanent. What does permanent mean? Jessica chimed in. It means the company thinks your mom is awesome, so they want to keep her. I lightly tapped Jessica's forehead. Stop talking in memes. Annie looked at me seriously. So, you won't get fired? Her question made the laughter in the room quiet down. I pulled Annie into my lap. I still have to do a good job, but now my job is more secure. She hugged my neck. I like that they're keeping you. That night, after everyone had left, I took out my expense notebook. I recalculated the rent, utilities, Annie's tuition, the money I paid Jessica for her help, food, milk, medicine, and a small amount set aside for emergencies. I opened a separate bank account in my own name and labeled it Annie's Fund. Every month, even if I only had a few $100s left, I transferred it there. Vince's child support payments were recorded separately, with the date received, and never mixed with my salary. The $25,000 savings account remained untouched. I only liquidated a small, penalty-free portion to pay for Annie's school registration, buy her a basic health insurance plan, and set aside a fund for potential hospital visits. I didn't want to hoard the money to the point of neglecting my child's needs, but I also couldn't treat it as a bottomless well for anyone in trouble to dip into. Life slowly fell into a routine. In the mornings, I took Annie to school on an old scooter I'd bought from a factory worker who was moving back home. She would sit behind me, her arms around my waist, singing songs Miss Fisher had taught her. At lunch, I ate in the cafeteria with Megan. We weren't close friends, but she no longer made snide remarks. One day, she saw me struggling with a batch of invoices for too long and rolled her chair over. Check the quantity column. The error is there, not in the product code. I found the mistake and said, "Thanks," Megan shrugged. "I just don't want the whole department to stay for overtime." She said it that way, but I knew she was trying to correct the way she had once judged others. In the afternoon, I would arrive at the school on time. Annie no longer ran out with a frantic look on her face, but every time she saw me, her face would light up. In the evenings, we would have dinner together. Sometimes it was a simple soup. Other times, just tofu and stir-fried vegetables. Annie would often pick the best piece from her plate and put it in mine. "You eat it, Mommy. You worked hard." I would give it back to her. "You eat it so you can grow big and strong." Annie would rest her chin on her hands. "When I grow up, I'll work and take care of you." I smiled. "Just focus on growing up kind for now. We'll worry about you taking care of me later." Not every day was happy. Some days, tuition was due before my paycheck arrived. Some nights, Annie would cough, and I would lie awake listening to every breath. But these were calculable worries, no longer the feeling of being held captive by dependency. One afternoon in mid-November, I was cross-referencing packing slips when my phone rang repeatedly. The caller ID said Mom. I looked at the screen, a familiar weight settling in my chest. Since I had left Conroe, my mother had only called a few times, mostly to ask about Annie or to complain that I hadn't visited. She never really asked how I was doing. I excused myself and stepped outside to answer. "Hello?" The other end was just heavy breathing, and then my mother burst into tears. "Leah, your father. He fell in the bathroom. The doctor said he had a mild stroke. He's at the regional hospital now." My hand gripped the railing. "Is he conscious, Mom?" "He's conscious, but he can't speak clearly. And he can't lift his left arm. You need to come home right away. Who else do we have to rely on now?" Her last sentence still had its familiar tone of blame, but this time, I didn't pay it any mind. An image of my father standing on the porch the day I left, his hoarse voice saying those two words, "I'm sorry," flashed in my mind. I went to Miss Hayes and explained the situation briefly. She looked at the work schedule and said, "Hand over the invoices you're working on to Megan. The company will give you 2 days of family emergency leave. If you need more, let me know. Thank you. When you get to the hospital, keep the receipts and the medical records. Stroke patients need a long recovery. Don't listen to anyone selling you miracle cures." I nodded, packed my things, and rushed to the school to pick up Annie early. On the way, I called Jessica. "My dad's in the hospital. I have to go back to my hometown urgently. Can you watch Annie for me tonight?" Jessica didn't ask a lot of questions. "Bring her over. I don't have classes tomorrow morning. I'll let Miss Fisher know too." When Annie heard that her grandpa was sick, she insisted on coming with me. I want to go visit Grandpa with you. I put my hands on her shoulders. The hospital is very crowded. You be a good girl and stay with Jessica. When Grandpa is better, I'll take you to see him. Is he going to die, Mommy? The words startled me. Don't say that. He's sick, and the doctors are helping him. Annie bit her lip, and then ran to get her latest drawing. Take this to him. Tell him Annie is waiting for him to get better. I folded the drawing, put it in my bag, kissed her, and took a bus back to Conroe that same afternoon. When I arrived at the regional hospital, the hallway lights were already on. My mother was sitting hunched over on a plastic chair, her hair a mess, her eyes swollen. When she saw me, she shot up. What took you so long? I didn't answer her accusation. I just asked, which room is Dad in? What exactly did the doctor say? She led me inside. My dad was lying in bed, the corner of his mouth drooping slightly, his left arm lying motionless on the blanket. When he saw me, his eyes turned red. I walked over and took his right hand. I'm back, Dad. He tried to open his mouth, but only broken sounds came out. Leah. I leaned down, a tear falling on the back of his thin hand. Don't talk, Dad. I'm here. I went to handle the paperwork, make an advance payment, and buy adult diapers, wet wipes, and soft porridge. Tyler wasn't there. My mom said he was at his internship and she couldn't reach him. Near midnight, I went to the hallway to get some water and saw my mom at the end of the stairwell, talking on the phone with Tyler. Her voice was very quiet but urgent. Your sister is here. You can relax. She has that savings account with over $25,000. This time, we have to get her to withdraw it to save the family. She can't just hoard it for herself and her kid. I stopped in the middle of the brightly lit hallway, the unopened water bottle still in my hand. My father was lying in the recovery room, still under observation, and yet that savings account had once again been brought up, like a key that everyone thought they had the right to use. I stood at the end of the hallway, listening to my mother talk to Tyler, and a coldness spread through me. My father was still lying in a hospital bed, one arm immobile, yet the first thing my mother thought of wasn't just his medicine, but how to use my savings account to fill the holes Tyler had dug. I didn't go and confront her right away. I went back to the room, placed the water bottle by the bed, and pulled the blanket up for my dad. He looked at me, his eyes weary. Are you thirsty, Dad? He blinked. I used a small cotton swab to give him sips of water, trying to keep my hand from shaking. Around 1 a.m., the doctor informed us that my dad's condition had stabilized. He had a minor stroke and needed further observation, medication, and early physical therapy. The immediate costs were not nearly as high as my mother had made me believe. I asked about every charge, requested a list of medications, kept the receipts, and paid an additional deposit. Only after all that was done did I go out to the hallway and sit next to my mom. Has Tyler come back yet? She avoided my eyes. He's on his way. His father is this sick, and he's only coming back now? He has his own problems. I looked directly at her. What kind of problems require money from my savings account? She flinched. You heard? I heard enough to know that you and Tyler are planning to take my money. She immediately changed her tone. Take? I'm not taking it. I'm borrowing it to take care of the family. Your father is in the hospital, and your brother is in trouble. Are you, as a daughter and a sister, just going to stand by and watch? How much do you need? Seeing that I was asking, my mother must have thought I was giving in. She pulled her chair closer and lowered her voice. About $15,000. I stared at her until she had to look away. Dad's treatment isn't that expensive. The doctor just said the immediate costs are manageable. What's the other part of the $15,000 for? My mom stammered. Long-term medication, physical therapy, and Tyler's tuition. How much for the hospital bills, and how much for Tyler? Be specific. She started to lose her patience. We're family. Why are you interrogating me like an auditor? It's money for Annie. I have to ask. Just then, Tyler appeared at the end of the hallway. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled down low, his clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep. When he saw me, he didn't ask about our dad but pulled my mom to a corner. I stopped him. Talk here. How much do you owe? Tyler scowled. You just got here and you're already grilling me? You're planning to use our father's illness to get my money. I have the right to ask. He turned to my mom. Mom, did you tell her? She snapped. Just be quiet and go see your father. But Tyler didn't move. He sat down and ran his hands through his hair. I only owe a little over $10,000. What's the little over? $10,500. Why? Tyler was silent. I asked again. Tuition or something else? My mom quickly interjected. He took out some payday loans to pay for school, and the interest just kept piling up, Tyler said irritably. Mom, you don't have to tell her everything. I looked at him. What else? After some back and forth, the truth came out. Tyler had taken out loans from 3 different apps, initially just a few thousand to buy a new phone and cover the rest of his tuition. Then he started betting on sports. When he lost, he borrowed more to try to win it back. When he couldn't pay on time, he went to a local loan shark. On top of that debt, my mom wanted me to give him another few $1,000s to buy a new car because he was embarrassed to drive his old one to his internship. I listened and wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. So, how much is actually needed for Dad? My mom whispered. About $2,000 for now. Later, there's physical therapy. So, out of the $15,000, only $2,000 was for my father. The rest was to pay off debts, cover tuition, and buy a new car for Tyler. My mom scowled. He's your brother. If he has a future, he can support us later. I looked at the woman who had called me home to care for her husband, but whose heart was still set on protecting her son. Mom, I've been here since this afternoon. The one handling the paperwork, paying the bills, and sitting by his bed is me. The person you call your support didn't show up until midnight, and he brought a mountain of debt with him. My mom's face turned red. Don't brag just because you have a little money. I gave birth to you. I raised you. Now that the family is in trouble, you have to step up. I will step up for my part. I took out the stack of receipts. The hospital bills, medicine, necessary supplies, and the initial physical therapy costs for Dad I will cover half. The other half is for you and Tyler to handle. If more is needed later for his actual treatment, I will reconsider. Tyler looked up sharply. And my debt? You say handle it yourself so easily. They're coming after me. How am I supposed to live? When you were borrowing money to gamble, did you ask me how I was supposed to live? Tyler slammed his hand on the chair. It was a one-time mistake. You have $25,000. Giving me 10 grand to save me won't make you broke. I'll get a job and pay you back. Have you ever worked a day in your life? That's why I need a car for my internship. The old car still runs. It runs, but it looks like a piece of junk. All my friends have nice cars. I looked at him, unable to believe that in a hospital hallway, he could still be talking about being embarrassed. You're in so much debt, you're dodging phone calls, your father is in the hospital, and the thing you're worried about is a car that makes you look bad in front of your friends? My mom immediately defended him. He's young. Everyone makes mistakes. You're his sister. If you don't save him, who will? I replied slowly. If a limb is injured, you treat it. But if a limb keeps stabbing itself in others, you can't ask the whole body to stand still and let it continue. My mom shot up. You have money, and you're just going to let your brother get harassed? Are you even his sister? I stood up too. My heart was pounding, but my voice was no longer shaking. I am Tyler's sister, but I am also Annie's mother. If I drain my savings to pay for the mistakes of adults, who will save my daughter when she gets sick? My mom pointed her finger at me. You've been selfish ever since your divorce. All you care about is your child, your own life. My throat tightened, but I didn't back down. I once gave my entire life to my husband because I thought we were a family. Then I brought my daughter back here because I thought blood relatives wouldn't be so calculating. Both times I almost lost everything because I believed that family had the right to take from me without asking. Tyler sneered. You act like you're so great. You got left by your husband too. What are you hoarding that money for? You'll just get married again and some other guy will take care of you. The hallway seemed to go silent. I walked up and slapped Tyler across the face. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make him freeze. My mom gasped, and I felt a hot sting on my palm. I had never hit my brother before. Growing up, no matter if he stole my things, broke my books, or was rude to me, my mom always told me that as the older sister, I had to give in. But that day, I couldn't give away any more of my self-respect. I looked straight at Tyler. Stop using my life as a wallet for your irresponsibility. My being divorced does not give anyone the right to look down on me. I am saving that money for my daughter, for a safe life, not for you to throw away on a football game." Tyler clutched his cheek, his eyes red. "You'll regret this slap. I'll remember it. And you should remember that today, your father is in the hospital, and you came here only to ask for money." The door to the hospital room behind us creaked open. I turned and saw my dad looking out, tears streaming from the corners of his eyes onto his pillow. His right hand tried to lift, trembling in my direction. I rushed to his side and took his hand. "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of your hospital bills. You just focus on getting better." He tried to speak, his mouth twisted, the sounds broken. "I'm sore." I shook my head. "Don't talk anymore." But his hand still gripped mine, weakly but insistently. In his eyes, I saw the shame of a father who knew his daughter had been hurt but hadn't been strong enough to protect her. I didn't know if I had forgiven him. I only knew that right then, he was a sick man who needed me. Tyler had to take responsibility for what he had done. The next morning, I met with the doctor, paid the bills, and scheduled my dad's physical therapy sessions. I gave my mom enough cash for expenses at the hospital, telling her to keep receipts for everything. She took the money, but her face was cold. Tyler no longer mentioned the savings account in front of me. He sat in the hallway, his head down, tapping on his phone as if trying to find another way out. In the afternoon, I said I had to return to Pasadena because of work and Annie. Before I left, I checked my phone for the bus schedule, and then went in to say goodbye to my dad. I didn't notice that while my mom was at the cafeteria buying porridge, Tyler had taken her phone. He opened her text messages, found the address I had once sent her for my apartment, and took a picture of the street name, building number, and even the location pin I had shared. Unable to get the money from me directly, Tyler had started thinking of a way to use the location of me and my daughter to force me to deal with his debt. 3 weeks after I returned to Pasadena, life seemed to have settled down. My dad was doing his physical therapy every morning, and my mom called to say his left hand was starting to move again. Tyler had practically disappeared. He didn't apologize, and he didn't bring up the money again. That afternoon, I picked Annie up from daycare early because she had a slight cough. We had just finished dinner when there were 3 loud bangs on the door. Bam! 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 Annie, who was coloring, jumped, and her crayon fell to the floor. A man's voice shouted, "Leah Miller, are you in there? Open up." I walked to the door but didn't open it. "Who's looking for me?" "Your brother owes us money. He said his sister has a $25,000 savings account. Open the door and let's sort this out." I didn't borrow any money, and I didn't co-sign anything. "You need to talk to the person who owes you." The person outside banged on the door even harder. "He's your brother. If you don't pay, things are going to get ugly for him." The sound of metal rattling made Annie scream. She scrambled under the table, her hands over her ears. "Mommy, are they going to take you away?" I turned and saw her face was pale. All the anger inside me instantly turned into cold, clear-headed resolve. I knelt down. "Annie, look at me! No one is going to take me away!" "I'm scared. I know. Come with me to Mrs. Martinez's, okay?" There was a small window in the back of my apartment that opened to the shared laundry area. I carried Annie and squeezed through to Mrs. Martinez's apartment. Jessica was there studying and immediately hugged the trembling little girl. I told her to lock the door and not let Annie out. Annie clung to my shirt. "Don't go, Mommy. I'll just be next door. I promise I won't go anywhere." Mrs. Martinez pulled me aside. "Call the police, Leah. Don't open the door and argue with them." I called 911, gave them the address, the number of men outside, and told them about the threats. Then I started a voice recording on my phone. "What are your names? Who gave you this address?" One of them laughed coldly. "You don't need to know our names. If you want peace, you'll call that brother of yours and tell him to bring the money. I'll say it again. I am not the borrower. Everything you are saying is being recorded." The voice outside grew menacing. "You think calling the cops is going to solve this?" Mrs. Martinez opened her door and stood in the courtyard with a broom in her hand. "If you're collecting a debt, go to the debtor. 2 grown men threatening a woman and a child. You must be so proud." One of them turned to her. "This doesn't concern you, old lady. Stay out of it." Mrs. Martinez slammed the broom handle on the ground. "I'm the landlady. You're banging on my property, so it concerns me. Don't you dare bring your gangster act to a working-class neighborhood." A few other doors opened. Someone was recording with their phone. The two men lost some of their aggression but still stood in front of my door. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived and took everyone down to the station. At the station, I provided the text messages and the audio recording and stated that I had not borrowed or co-signed for any loans for my brother. The two men admitted that Tyler had told them to come to my address if he was late with a payment because his sister wouldn't dare let anything happen to him. I felt a deep sense of shame for my own brother. I called my mom. "Get Tyler to the Pasadena police station. Now." She was frantic. "What happened?" "Some men just came and banged on our door, threatening us in front of Annie." "Don't ask any more questions. Just bring him here." Nearly 2 hours later, my mom and Tyler showed up. Tyler had his hat pulled down low, walking behind my mom like a child who had just caused trouble. As soon as she saw me, my mom grabbed my hand. "Leah, let's just handle this quietly. Don't make a big deal and get your brother in trouble." I pulled my hand away. "Go look at Annie first." Jessica had just brought Annie to the station. The little girl was clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes swollen. When she saw my mom, she didn't run over but hid behind Jessica. My mom bent down. "Annie, come to Grandma." Annie shook her head, her voice hoarse. "Grandma, please don't let them take my mommy." My mother froze. Annie started to sob. "Uncle Tyler said Mommy has money. They were banging on the door. Are they going to take her away, Grandma?" My mom turned to look at Tyler, for the first time seeing clearly how the son she had spoiled had brought danger to her granddaughter. She walked over and slapped him hard. "Look at your niece." Tyler clutched his cheek. "Mom, what was that for?" "I was wrong to spoil you. You think the whole family has to die for your mistakes," he mumbled. "I just told them my sister had money, so they would give me an extension." "An extension? They came here and terrorized a child. You used your sister's address as a shield." Tyler hung his head, not daring to argue. My mom turned to me, her lips trembling. "Leah, maybe you can just help him this one time. Lend him the money. After this, I'll make him get a job." I looked at my mom for a long time. "You just saw how terrified Annie was, and you still want me to pay for his mistakes?" She choked on her words. I spoke slowly. "I am not paying a single dollar of Tyler's debt. He needs to state clearly how much he owes, to whom, and take responsibility for it himself." The officer had Tyler write a statement, pledging not to use my name, address, or information for any future loans or promises of payment. They also made it clear that coming to my home to threaten and disturb the peace was illegal. The debt had to be dealt with directly with the borrower. As Tyler wrote, sweat dripped down his temples. His arrogant demeanor, built on the belief that his mom would always clean up his messes, was gone. My mom made him call the owner of an air conditioning repair shop to ask for a job as an assistant, starting next week. The expensive phone he had bought with the loan money had to be sold to pay off some of the debt. The old car would have to do. There would be no new one. Tyler turned to me, his voice small. "Leah, I'm sorry." I asked, "Are you sorry because you scared Annie, or because the police were called?" He hung his head lower. "Both. I don't believe you yet. Go to work, pay back every cent yourself, and stop dragging our parents, me, and Annie into your problems. When you've done that, then you can apologize." It was almost dark when we left the station. Annie clung tightly to my hand, and my mom walked silently behind us. When we got back to the apartment complex, Mrs. Martinez brought over a pot of hot porridge. Annie ate a few spoonfuls and then kept asking if I was going to be taken away. I held her and answered for the 10th time, "No, I'm right here." My mom sat on a plastic chair, looking at the door, which still had marks from the banging, and then at her granddaughter, who had fallen asleep with her hand still clutching my shirt. That night, my mother didn't go back to Conroe. She asked if she could stay for the night. For the first time, the woman who thought I was living a life of leisure on a large sum of money had to sit in the sweltering room where her daughter had used every penny of her salary and all her vigilance to maintain a small, peaceful space for her grandchild. That night, my mom sat for a long time on the plastic chair by the door. The room was lit by a single yellow bulb, hot and stuffy despite the old fan spinning at full speed. Annie slept in my lap, twitching occasionally, her hand reaching for my neck as if to check if I was still there. My mom saw it all. She saw the dented rice cooker in the corner, Annie's 2 school uniforms hanging neatly on a line, the budget sheet taped to the back of the door, and the stack of tuition receipts held together by a small plastic clip. She asked quietly, "You write everything down like this every month?" "Yes. If I don't, it's easy to overspend." "Is your salary enough?" "It's enough, as long as there are no unexpected expenses." "As for the savings," I turned to her. My mom flinched, as if afraid that just mentioning the money would slam shut the door that had just begun to open between us. I spoke first. "I still have it, but I don't live on it. I work to cover our monthly expenses. That money is for when Annie gets sick, for her education, or for when we truly need a long-term place to live." My mom looked down at her own calloused hands. "I always thought that with over $25,000, you must be living comfortably." I glanced around the room, which was about the size of her kitchen back home. "That money doesn't create a babysitter out of thin air. It doesn't stop me from worrying about Annie's fevers when I'm at work, and it doesn't make people stop looking down on a divorced woman. It only gives me a safety net, and I can't afford to use that safety net for daily living." My mom said nothing. I gently laid Annie down on the bed and pulled the blanket over her. My mom stood up, as if to help. But the moment she touched her granddaughter's arm, Annie flinched and pulled away. "Mommy?" "I'm here, sweetie." I rubbed her back until she settled down. When I turned back, I saw my mom looking at her granddaughter, her eyes red. "She's been this jumpy for a while. It's not just today. Ever since her father started visiting less, she's been asking if I'm going to leave her." Then, back at your house, she heard the adults talking about us staying over. "And then what happened today?" I didn't continue. My mom understood the rest. She bit her lip and stepped out onto the small porch in front of the room. I followed and sat down on the stoop. A heavy silence settled between us, heavier than any argument. In the courtyard, workers' clothes swayed gently in the breeze. From the next room, I could hear someone singing a lullaby. Further away, the sound of trucks on the main road. My mom spoke first. "When you first called to tell me about the divorce, I was so angry." "I know." "I wasn't just angry about losing face. I was afraid." I turned to her. "Afraid of what?" "I was afraid you would come home with a small child and depend on us for the rest of your life. Afraid people would say we didn't raise our daughter right. Afraid that Tyler wasn't even married yet, and we would have a divorced daughter living in the house." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You were afraid of everything except that I might be in pain." That sentence made my mother bow her head. "I always thought that once a woman gets married, her husband's house is her home. No matter what happened, she had to endure it. When I was young and living with your father, we were so poor we ate potatoes with our rice. We argued sometimes, but I never dared to go back to my parents' house. But Dad never had another woman." My mom was silent. I continued. "I didn't leave because of an argument. I had been living alone in that marriage for a long time. When I came back here, I didn't need you to give me money. I just needed you to ask if I was okay." Tears streamed down my mother's face. I was wrong. Those 3 short words were what I had been waiting to hear since the day I stood behind the kitchen partition. She wiped her tears with the hem of her shirt. "I always thought a son was the pillar of the family. A daughter gets married and becomes part of another family. I gave everything to Tyler, from every morsel of food to every dollar. I thought he would take care of us when we got old. But when your father fell, the one who rushed back was you. When he got into trouble, the one they came after was you." I looked at my mother. "I don't need you to hate Tyler to love me. I know. And I don't want you to think that because you slapped him today, everything is settled. Tyler is irresponsible not just because of himself. He's like that because since he was a child, someone always cleaned up his messes." My mother nodded, tears still falling. "I loved him the wrong way." I took a deep breath. "I can be less angry with you, Mom, but for me to trust you again, I need time." She turned to me, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just asking you to let me try to make it right." I didn't hug her. Some wounds are too deep to be healed with a single hug in one night. I just pulled the plastic chair closer so she could lean back. The next morning, my mom woke up early to make porridge. She opened the cupboard to get the rice and saw there was only half a bag left. She took out her wallet to go to the store. I stopped her. "Let me get it, Mom." She shook her head. "I'm buying this for my granddaughter." It was the first time she hadn't called Annie the little one or her. It was a small change, but I heard it clearly. When Annie woke up and saw her grandmother was still there, she hid behind me. My mom didn't force her to come closer. She just placed the bowl of porridge on the table. "Annie, if you want to eat, you can eat. Grandma will sit over here." The little girl looked at her for a moment and then asked, "Are you going to let those men take my mommy?" My mom's eyes reddened. "No." Grandma was wrong. "From now on, if anyone scares your mommy, I won't let them." Annie didn't run to hug her. She just sat down and ate, one small spoonful at a time. But for me, that was a start. In the afternoon, my mom went back home. Before she left, she pressed a bag of vegetables and a few eggs she had bought at the market into my hands. "Can I come visit Annie this weekend?" "Call before you come." "Okay, I'll call." I didn't promise that everything would go back to the way it was. Some relationships, once broken, can't be put back together in the same shape. You can only patiently build a new way of being together, with clearer boundaries and less pain. 2 days later, Vince came to pick up Annie as scheduled. She didn't want to go, but I encouraged her. "Daddy will just take you to play for a few hours, and you'll be back this afternoon. If anything happens, you can call me." Vince stood at the door and was surprised to see the fresh vegetables from my mom. "Your mom came to visit?" My mother, who happened to be there, just replied flatly, "Yes. If you're taking my granddaughter out, you'd better keep a close eye on her." Vince seemed annoyed by her tone but didn't say anything. That afternoon, Annie came back nearly an hour late. She got out of the car with swollen eyes, refused to say goodbye to anyone, and rushed to hug me as soon as she saw me. "What happened, sweetie?" Annie shook her head and just said, "I want to go inside." I looked at Vince. She cried. "Why? It's just kids being difficult." Diana was trying to take a few family photos, and Annie wouldn't stand close to her, so she started crying. I felt a hot flush of anger. "What family?" Vince frowned. "Don't get hung up on words. Diana is going to be my wife. She has to get used to Annie." I carried Annie into the apartment, and before I could ask more, Jessica sent me a screenshot. On Diana's Instagram story was a short video showing half of Annie's crying face, with the caption, "Some children are taught by adults to fear and resist their own fathers. All you can do is be patient. It hurts to see." My hands went cold. Diana didn't use my name, but anyone who knew the situation would understand who she was talking about. My daughter's tears were being used as evidence for her to play the role of the benevolent stepmother. I didn't call and scream. I screenshotted everything, saved the time of the post and the link, and had Jessica record it on another phone in case it was deleted. Then I sent a message to Diana. "Take down the video with my daughter's image and voice immediately. You do not have the right to use a child to make passive-aggressive attacks or build your personal brand." She saw the message but didn't reply. I sent a message to Vince with a drafted agreement. A clear schedule for pickups and drop-offs, with advance notice of locations. Diana is not permitted to post any images, audio, or information related to Annie without my consent. Vince called me right away. "You're overreacting." "I'm protecting my child. Diana only posted a few seconds. You can't even see her whole face." Not seeing her whole face doesn't mean she can't be recognized. And it certainly doesn't give her the right to use my child's crying as a prop. "You always think everyone is out to get you." I looked at Annie, who was sitting huddled in a corner of the bed. "I am not stopping you from being a father, but I am stopping any adult from using my child to win their battles." Vince was silent. I said, each word deliberate, "The video needs to be down by tonight. If this happens again, I will use the evidence I have saved and we will have to revisit the terms of your visits." Less than 10 minutes later, the story was gone. But that night, when a man in the hallway called out loudly, Annie jumped, dropped her glass of water, and ran to hug me. I understood that a video could be deleted in seconds, but the fear that adults plant in a child's heart doesn't disappear so easily. After the incident with the video, Annie stopped asking about her dad's house. Whenever the phone rang around the time Vince usually called, she would just bend over her coloring book as if she couldn't hear. I asked Miss Fisher to keep an extra eye on her. She said Annie was still playing with her friends and eating and sleeping normally, but she startled easily at the sound of a loud male voice. Children don't always know how to articulate their fears. Sometimes they just withdraw or become clingier. Adults think they'll forget in a few days. Her words weighed heavily on me. I could force someone to take down a video, but I couldn't command the fear in my daughter's heart to disappear. Dan continued to be a steady presence, but he never overstepped. One day he'd stop by to fix a loose cabinet hinge. Another day he'd bring over some old storybooks from his niece. Before buying anything for Annie, he always asked me first. Only once did he forget. At the end of the month, the school announced that the next 3 months' tuition was due. At the same time, my scooter broke down, and Annie needed more medicine. I was planning to ask the school if I could pay in 2 installments. The next morning, Miss Fisher called me over. "Leah, Annie's tuition has been paid." "Who paid it?" "A Mr. Roberts. He said he was a relative." That afternoon, I asked Dan to meet me at a coffee shop near the company. As soon as he sat down, he said, "Don't be upset. I just paid it for you. You can pay me back whenever it's convenient." I opened my banking app and transferred the full amount back to him. "I've paid you back." Dan looked at the screen, his smile fading. "Leah, I wasn't asking for it back. The issue isn't whether you were asking for it back. The issue is that you went to the school, said you were a relative, and made a decision to pay her tuition without asking me. I saw you were struggling, so I wanted to help. I know you have good intentions, Dan, but it makes me feel like someone else is driving my life again. Vince used to think that because he earned the money, he had the right to decide everything. My mom used to think that because she gave birth to me, she had the right to control my finances. I don't want someone who is kind to me to unintentionally do the same thing." Dan looked down at his coffee. "I was just afraid you were having a hard time. If I'm having a hard time, I'll say so. You can ask me what I need, but please don't help by making my decisions for me." After a moment, Dan looked up. "I'm sorry. I thought I was just doing something helpful without making you feel awkward. But you're right. I turned my good intentions into pressure." My voice softened. "I don't need someone to rescue me and my daughter. I need someone who is respectful enough to stand beside us. From now on, I'll ask first." After that day, he kept his word. When Annie's bookshelf came loose, he texted to ask if he should come by. When the company gave out mooncakes for the Mid-Autumn Festival, he asked before bringing some over. Annie still called him Mr. Dan. One time, Jessica teased, "Mr. Dan loves Annie so much. Why don't you just call him Daddy?" Annie immediately shook her head. "My daddy is Daddy Vince. Mr. Dan is Mr. Dan." I was afraid Dan would be hurt, but he just stroked her hair. "That's right. Everyone has their own place and their own name." The way he didn't try to claim a title made me trust him a little more. On a Friday afternoon, I was checking the weekend inventory with Megan when I got a call from Miss Fisher. "Leah, Annie fell in the schoolyard. She hit her head. We're taking her to the hospital now." I dropped my pen. "Is she conscious?" "She's conscious, but drowsy. She threw up once. Please come to the hospital near the school right away." Miss Hayes called a car for me, and Megan ran after me with my purse. On the way, all I could think about was my promise to come back and pick her up every afternoon. When I got to the emergency room, I saw Miss Fisher standing outside the door, her clothes dusty, her face pale. "Annie is with the doctor." We were outside in the yard, and another parent called out loudly for his child. Annie got startled, turned around, and tripped on the step. The word startled sent a sharp pain through my chest. "Miss," Fisher took my hand. "I'm so sorry. If only I had been standing closer. It's not your fault. You brought her here right away. That's what matters." The doctor said Annie needed a CT scan because of the impact to her forehead and the fact that she had vomited. When the nurse wheeled her out, her small face was almost completely hidden by a white bandage. "Mommy," she whispered. I ran alongside the gurney and took her cold hand. "I'm here, sweetie. I'm here. I didn't mean to fall. It's okay. It's not your fault." Dan arrived about 15 minutes later. He didn't bombard me with questions. He just took the paperwork, went to pay the deposit, and then placed a bottle of water next to me. "Drink some water. Your hands are shaking." I didn't move. "Okay, it's here when you're ready." He sat in a chair one over from me. He didn't put his arm around me or promise everything would be okay when we didn't have the results yet. His quiet, respectful presence kept me from completely falling apart. Vince arrived nearly an hour later, alone. How is she? Why did she fall? What kind of school is this? I turned to him and said quietly, "Lower your voice. She's scared." Vince stopped. The scan showed Annie had a mild concussion, but no internal bleeding or skull fracture. She had to be observed for 48 hours. When she was moved to a room, she was still drowsy. I sat by her bed. Vince stood at the foot. Dan quietly went out to buy some porridge. A little while later, Annie opened her eyes. She looked around, and when she saw Vince, her lips trembled, but she didn't call for him. She just reached her hand out to me. "Mommy." I leaned over and hugged her gently. "I'm here. I'm scared they're going to take you away." The entire room went silent. Vince was frozen. He looked at his daughter, then at me, as if for the first time understanding how the late payments, the missed visits, the shouting, and the video that was only a few seconds had all piled up into a mountain of fear in a small child's heart. I stroked Annie's hair. "No one is going to take me away. I'm right here with you." She clutched my shirt tightly and closed her eyes. Vince turned his face to the door, his hands clenched into fists. But this time, he had no one to blame. Not me, not the school, not the circumstances. Some debts that adults owe cannot be paid with money. They linger in the frightened eyes of a child, waiting for the day the person who caused them has to look at them directly. The 2 days Annie was in the hospital were the longest of my life. She stopped vomiting and could eat a few spoonfuls of porridge, but every time a man's loud voice echoed from the hallway, her small hand would grip mine. The doctor said that after she was discharged, she needed to rest and avoid any stimuli that might frighten her. My mom came up from Conroe early in the morning, bringing a thermos of fish porridge and some clean clothes. She just sat a short distance from the bed and asked quietly, "Annie, have a little porridge with Grandma." Annie looked at me. I nodded, and she opened her mouth. My mom turned away to wipe a tear, as relieved as if she'd been granted a pardon. My dad video called from home. After his physical therapy, he could speak in short phrases. "Annie, get well soon." My daughter managed a weak smile. "You get well soon too, Grandpa." It was the first time she had smiled since the accident. I turned to the window, tears rolling down my cheeks. That afternoon, Vince asked to speak with me privately in the hallway. His shirt was wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes, a stark contrast to his usual polished appearance. "I'm sorry," he began. "I always thought sending money was enough to be a good father. It wasn't until I heard her say she was afraid they would take you away that I realized how long she's been living in fear. It's late, but at least you understand now. I'm not asking you to come back. I just want to make things right with her." I handed him a calendar with clear dates and times for his visits and a list of things to keep in mind regarding Annie's psychological state. "From now on, you follow this schedule. If you're busy, you give advance notice. You don't take her somewhere else without discussing it, and you don't let Diana post or use any pictures of her. If you want to be a father, start by keeping your word." Vince took the paper and lowered his head. Later, he told Diana to delete all photos related to Annie and not to interfere with their time together. Diana sent me a text. "You won." I didn't reply. I wasn't fighting with her over a man. Losing the right to use a child's tears to paint herself in a positive light was the consequence she had to face. Annie was discharged after 48 hours. I took her to see a child psychologist recommended by Miss Fisher. Annie learned to name her fears, and I learned to listen. Some days, she didn't want to see her father, and I didn't force her. Some days, she agreed to go to the park with Vince, and I didn't stop her. Healing wasn't about erasing someone from the picture. It was about letting her know she was still safe. A month later, Miss Hayes called me in. "The Baytown branch is opening a new warehouse. I've recommended you to oversee the initial phase. The salary is $4,500 a month, with benefits." I was thrilled but also worried. Taking the job meant moving, changing Annie's school. Miss Hayes said, "Stability doesn't mean standing still. Stability is knowing that wherever you are, your daughter knows her mother will always come back to pick her up." That night, I told Annie about the new place. She asked, "Will the new house have a place for me to draw, Mommy?" "Yes. I'll make a special corner just for you. Can my stuffed bunny come with us?" I took the job. The apartment near the industrial park was 400 square feet. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, with a balcony and a corner for Annie's desk. On moving day, my mom brought over a pot of basil and a basket of vegetables from her garden. She asked, "Can I put this plant on the balcony?" My mother had learned to ask before arranging my life. "Yes, Mom. Put it where it can get some sun." Annie ran all over the room and cheered. "Our house doesn't leak anymore, Mommy." I hugged her. "That's right, this is our house. No one can ever kick us out." A year later, I became the official warehouse supervisor. Megan and I never became best friends, but we learned to support each other when needed. Miss Hayes was still strict, but now she would sometimes call me in to ask for my opinion. Tyler sold his expensive phone, worked as an AC repair assistant, and paid off his debts month by month. My mom no longer secretly gave him money. She said, "If you make a mistake, you fix it. That's how you become a man." I wasn't entirely convinced, but I didn't close the door on him. My dad patiently practiced speaking. One day at dinner, he looked at me for a long time and managed a full sentence. "Leah, home for dinner." Those 4 clumsy words made me have to turn away to hide my tears. Dan remained by our side, slowly and steadily. He never pushed Annie to call him Dad, and he never made decisions for me. One evening on the balcony, he asked, "Can I continue to walk alongside you and your daughter for the long term?" I replied, "I don't need a savior. I need someone who respects me, loves Annie, and doesn't ask us to trade our independence." Dan nodded. "I will learn how to stay the right way." Annie still calls him Mr. Dan. In her new drawings, he's no longer standing outside the gate but next to the basil plant on the balcony. One morning at the company, a young woman carrying a baby came in to apply for a job. Her shirt was stained with milk, her eyes red from lack of sleep. She said she had just gotten divorced, had no place of her own, and was afraid the company would reject her for having a young child. I looked at her and saw myself a year ago. I didn't tell her everything would be easy because that would be a lie. I poured her a glass of water, gave her the number for legal aid and the address of a daycare near the industrial park, and said, "You're not starting from zero. You're starting with experience, with all the times you've fallen and gotten back up, and with the child who needs you to be strong." That evening, I returned to our small apartment. My mom was shelling peas in the kitchen. Annie was coloring a picture. Dan was fixing a bookshelf. In her picture, there was a mommy, a little girl, a grandma, and Mr. Dan. In a corner, far away, was Daddy Vince, standing by a fence. She hadn't erased him, but he was no longer the center of her sadness. I used to think that losing a marriage was losing my whole life. Only later did I understand that the scariest thing isn't starting over, but staying in a place where other people have the power to hurt you. In life, a woman after divorce should never see herself as empty-handed. What's important to hold on to isn't just the money, but the paperwork, your self-respect, clear boundaries, and your child's heart. Family can be forgiven, but forgiveness doesn't mean giving them permission to keep making the same mistakes. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment below. Thank you for listening. I wish you all good health and peace, and I'll see you in the next story.